Hey everyone, so today we're going to talk about Bitcoin and that $42,000 level. We'll look at the last year of price action to determine if there are any clues that can tell us whether or not Bitcoin is likely to retest 42 before moving higher or if the low is already in. And what you guys are about to see is pretty eye-opening, so you're going to want to stick around. And before we get started too, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave your comment, because if I know you guys are enjoying this content, I'm going to be more motivated to make more of it. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and jump right into it. And what we're going to do is go back over the last year, look at the pullbacks, and identify liquidation candles to see whether or not Bitcoin has a tendency to retest that low before moving higher, or if once that liquidation candle is in, then the low is in and Bitcoin moves higher. So first up, let's start with January here. And the candle I want to focus on is this one. So, yeah, there were a lot of liquidations on this candle here too. But this is the one I want to focus on simply because this right here, I believe, was the largest red candle that Bitcoin had seen at the time. So this candle was about $7,600, which, we've seen bigger candles since then. But at the time, like I said, I think this was the biggest red candle Bitcoin had ever seen. And the reason we know that this was a liquidation event is simply because of this long lower wick. So, the market came down here, flushed out a lot of longs, and then closed quite a bit higher than the low. Now, what's interesting about this is, Bitcoin moved up initially, and a lot of people probably thought, okay, the low is in, and we're about to do this. Instead, Bitcoin went sideways for a while. Then it actually moved down here to the low. But what's interesting is it didn't stop at the low, it took it out. Okay, so it took out that low, and then moved higher. All right, so I know that that's only one instance, but let's go ahead and look through some of these other pullbacks and see what we see. So this one right here, once again, we have two big red candles. Now liquidations on both of these. However, I do want to use this one, and really it doesn't matter which one you use simply because the concept here is the same. So, Bitcoin came down, took out a lot of longs here, moved sideways for a couple of days, came down, and once again, took out this low. So it actually moved down here to this liquidation low and moved below it before moving higher. Now, at the time, I can guarantee you a lot of people thought that once they saw this low right here and Bitcoin was trading up here, that they thought, okay, the low has to be in, right, given how much this market is off, and it's just going to move higher. But instead, came down, took out the low. All right, so let's go ahead and move forward now and see what else we see. This pullback right here, there was really no liquidation. It was a pretty orderly pullback. So we didn't have any candles with long lower wicks. So we're going to go ahead and not pay attention to that area. And moving over here, though, you can see that we do have a candle right here that fits the criteria. So once again, the range on this candle was over $9,000. We also have a long lower wick. Now, again, Bitcoin went sideways for a few days, came down, and not only retested this low, but actually took it out before moving higher. It even closed below that liquidation low. Okay, so that's another scenario where Bitcoin came down, retested that low, moved below it before moving higher again. Now, obviously, this was a lower high, and then we got the May pullback, which we all know all too well. It was a crazy period. And this is the candle I want to pay attention to. So right here in May, when we had this pullback, now Bitcoin retested the majority of this wick here early on. However, once again, what's interesting is if you look at the low down here, on two occasions, Bitcoin actually moved below that low. So it filled this entire wick and then some. All right, now let's move forward again and see what else we have here. And you can see that once again, we have this pullback here. Okay, so we're looking at this range. And right away, we can see that this was a liquidation candle. Okay, it fits the criteria in that it was almost a $10,000 wick, or I'm sorry, $10,000 candle. And what we then had was a long lower wick where Bitcoin went sideways for a few weeks. It then came down and tested this area, but what's interesting is, once again, we saw Bitcoin not only stop at that low, but it actually moved below it and closed the day below it. So, this is the low we're talking about here. And you can see where Bitcoin came down, took out that low, churned sideways for a few days before moving considerably higher. All right, now, if we fast forward to what's happening right now, obviously this is our liquidation candle on December 4th, and Bitcoin tested 42, okay, $42,000. Now, we also have, once again, long lower wick, and right now Bitcoin is kind of in the process of filling in that lower wick. But the question is it going to fill in the wick completely, or is it just going to churn sideways to lower and then just bounce from this area down here? Okay, so right around 45,000. Now, if we use history as a guide here over the past year and, think about what I just showed you, Bitcoin, every single time there has been a liquidation candle, it has not only retested that low, but it's actually moved just below it before moving higher. So what I think could happen here, and again, nobody knows where the market is going to go, so that's very important to keep in mind. But if we look at this $42,000 low back here, yes, it tested that 40,000 area. However, what if we get something like this, where the market moves lower, retests this low, but then actually moves down here toward 40. All right, so these lows back here and some of these highs. So it would look like this, where we get, if we put a horizontal level here on our chart, so right around these lows, where we get Bitcoin actually coming below 42. Okay, so coming below 42 down toward 40, and then we get that bounce higher into January. Now, what that would do is a lot of people would be getting bearish through here. Same thing that we had back here. All right, if you'll remember back in July, when Bitcoin started to test 29,000, everybody was peak bearish. I mean, that's when everybody was talking about getting short for $20,000, etc. And I think this could be something very similar where we see Bitcoin come down, test 42, drop below it toward 40, and all of a sudden everybody starts talking about $30,000 again, right? Bitcoin is going to just drop down to 30,000. But it could be a very similar situation where we get a move below 42, down toward 40, and then that's the bottom. All right, so again, we're just looking at history here. There's no way, I don't know what's going to happen. Nobody does. But if we use history and just look at how Bitcoin has treated these liquidation candles in the past, there is reason to believe, okay, that Bitcoin is going to come down to 42 again and potentially down toward 40 before finding a bottom. Okay, now one thing I did talk about last week is if we look at the 4-hour time frame and just go back here toward July, and this would kind of satisfy what I'm referring to with testing $40,000. If we look at this price action through here, all right, so this area right here when Bitcoin tested $29,000. All right, so this right here could potentially play out. And it kind of is so far. If you look at the price action so far, let me just make this a little bit darker. So it kind of is so far where Bitcoin is just kind of going sideways after that liquidation candle. So if we were to see something similar to this play out again, where for the next couple of weeks, Bitcoin continues to just kind of slide lower, right? Drops below this trend line from April, moves down here into 40,000. Then we get that low into January. Because if you look at this, this is the very end of December. All right, so that's something that I'm paying attention to. I'm not necessarily using this fractal, as an absolute guide in that if Bitcoin deviates, then it's no longer valid, because I really don't like fractals all that much. But in this case, this is something that could play out. So, I think that the key takeaway here, guys, is that nobody knows where Bitcoin is going to go from here. However, again, if we look at history, Bitcoin does have a tendency to fill in those liquidation wicks and actually move below them before moving higher again. So I hope that this has helped. Again, if you like this content, be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and leave your comment below. I do try to make it a point to respond to every single comment. All right, guys, so I hope that this has helped. I'll talk to you again soon.